Celebration interrupted. The grand hall of the Zorgan Palace was alive with music and laughter. Colorful banners hung from the walls as the smell of exotic delicacies filled the air. The Zorans, a proud alien race, was celebrating their recent victory over the humans supreme. Commander Zoth stood at the center of the festivities, his chest puffed out. With pride, my fellow Zorgans, he bellowed, raising a glass of shimmering liquid. Today we have proven our superiority over the weak and foolish humans. They dared to challenge our might, and they have paid the price. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. They clinked glasses and slapped each other on the back, reveling in their triumph. But not everyone shared in the jubilation. Zorax, a young scout, stood quietly near the entrance, his mind troubled by what he had seen on his recent mission. He had been tasked with monitoring human activity near the borders of Zorgan space, and what he discovered chilled him to the bone. Gathering his courage, Zorax approached. "The Supreme Commander, sir, I have urgent news," he said, his voice trembling. "Slightly during my patrol, I detected a massive human warship heading straight for our home world. We must prepare for." Xof cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Nonsense," he scoffed. "The humans are broken and scattered. They wouldn't dare attack us now." Zorax persisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "But sir, this ship is unlike anything we've seen before. It's faster and more heavily armed than enough." Xof snapped, his eyes narrowing. "I won't have you spoiling our victory with your baseless fears. Go and enjoy the celebration, Zorax." "That's an order." Zorax bowed his head and backed away, feeling a sense of dread wash over him. He knew he couldn't just ignore what he had seen. The Zoran had to be warned. As the party continued around him, Zorax slipped out of the grand hall and made his way to the barracks. There, he found a group of warriors drinking and laughing, their weapons cast aside. "Please, you have to listen to me," Zorax pleaded, approaching the group. "The humans are coming. We need to prepare for an attack." The warriors eyed him skeptically. "The humans defeated them." "We did," one said, his words slurred from too much ale. "Nothing to fear, we have." Zorx shook his head, frustration welling up inside him. "You don't understand, this is different. They have a new ship more powerful than anything bar." Another warrior interrupted, waving the dismissive hand. "Scouts' tales. Nothing more. Go bother someone else with your stories." Zorax stood there for a moment, his fists clenched at his sides. He knew he was running out of time. If the warriors wouldn't listen, he would have to find another way to warn the Zorgan people. With a heavy heart, Zorax turned and walked away, his mind racing with possibilities. Somehow he had to make them see the danger that was coming. The fate of his entire species might depend on it. Mounting tension in the days following the victory celebration, Zorax worked tirelessly to spread his warning. He sent urgent messages to every Zorgan outpost and colony he could reach, describing the massive human ship he had seen and pleading for them to prepare for an attack. At first, his messages were met with skepticism and disbelief. Many Zorgan simply couldn't accept that the humans could pose a threat so soon after their defeat. They dismissed Zorax, his warnings, as the ravings of a paranoid scout, not to be taken seriously. But as more and more reports began to filter in from the edges of Zorgan space, a sense of unease started to grow. Strange energy signatures were being detected, unlike anything the Zorans had encountered before. Whispers began to circulate of a vast human fleet massing just beyond the range of Zorgan sensors. Some warriors, who had initially scoffed at Zorax's warnings, now started to question the wisdom of the Supreme Commander's unwavering confidence. They began to hold secret meetings discussing contingency plans and strategies for defense. Zorax felt a small measure of relief that his message was finally starting to get through, but he knew it might already be too late. The humans were drawing closer every day, and the Zorgan leadership seemed content to bury their heads in the sand. Supreme Commander Zoloff continued to project an air of unshakable certainty, dismissing any talk of a human threat as baseless rumor mongering. He ordered the Zorgan fleet to stand down, insisting that any show of force would only provoke the humans unnecessarily behind closed doors. However, even Silo was starting to feel the pressure. Reports from his spies indicated that the human ship was indeed a new and formidable design with weapons and defenses far beyond anything the Zorgans had faced before. Still, Xylo refused to let his doubt show. He was the supreme commander. After all, it was his duty to project strength and confidence in the face of any challenge. As the tension mounted, Zorax found himself increasingly isolated. Many of his fellow Zorgans, even those who had started to heed his warnings, resented him for being the bearer of bad news. They accused him of undermining morale and questioned his loyalty. Zorks bore their criticism stoically, knowing that he was doing what he believed was right. He continued to push for preparations and defenses, even as the Supreme Commander's inner circle worked to silence and discredit him. Then, on a day that started like any other, everything changed. Alarms blared across the Zorgan homeworld as long-range sensors detected a massive object dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was the human warship, and it was heading straight for them. The humans arrived. The arrival of the human warship sent shockwaves through Zorgan society. Never before had an enemy dared to approach their homeworld so directly, much less with a single vessel. As the massive ship took up orbit around the planet, the humans broadcast a simple, chilling message on all Zorgan frequencies: surrender or be destroyed. Panic spread like wildfire. Civilians flood to underground shelters as warriors scramble to their posts, suddenly faced with the terrifying reality of an imminent attack. Supreme Commander Zoff found himself besieged on all sides by demands for action. His advisors urged him to launch an immediate counterattack to show the humans that the Zoran would not be intimidated, but Zoff hesitated suddenly, unsure of himself in the face of this unprecedented threat. He had always believed in the superiority of Zorgan technology and tactics, but the sight of that monstrous human ship hanging over his world shook him to his core. In the midst of the chaos, Zorax made his way to the command center, pushing his way through crowds of frightened civilians and grim-faced warriors. He had to make Zoff reason before it was too late. Supreme Commander Zorks called out as he burst into the room, "We must negotiate with the humans. We cannot win this fight." Silo rounded on him, his eyes blazing with fury. "Negotiate with those savages? Never! I will not bow to their threats." Zorax pressed on, desperation lending strength to his voice. "Sir, please, that ship, it's more powerful than anything we've ever seen. If we fight, we will lose everything, but if we talk, maybe we can find a way." The rest of his words were drowned out by a sudden deafening roar. The human ship had begun its attack, unleashing a devastating orbital bombardment on the Zorgan capital. The command center shook violently as explosions ripped through the city outside. Screens flickered and went dark as power systems failed. Alarms wailed, and sparks rained down from rude conduits. In the midst of the chaos, Skoff stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. He had never truly believed it could come to this, that the humans could bring such destruction to the heart of Zorgan power. Zorks knew there was no more time for talk. As the bombardment continued, he raced out of the command center and headed for the nearest defensive position. Whatever happened next, he would stand with his fellow warriors and fight for the survival of his people. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The Zorans had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. As the city burned around him, Zorks could only hope that somehow, against all odds, they would find a way to endure desperate measures. The human onslaught was relentless. For days, the Zorgan home world burned under the savage bombardment from orbit. Cities were reduced to rubble, entire armies wiped out in the blink of an eye. The once proud defenses of the Zorgan people crumbled like sand before the tide of human firepower. Their ships, so long the terror of a 100 star systems, was swatted from the sky like insects in the ruined capital. Supreme Commander Zeloth huddled with his surviving advisors, desperately searching for a way to turn the tide. But every strategy they devised, every weapon they deployed, proved useless against the overwhelming might of the human warship. Zorax, meanwhile, fought on the front lines, rallying the battered remnants of the Zor defense forces. They dug into the rubble, mounting a desperate guerrilla resistance against the human ground troops that poured from landing craft like a plague of locusts. But even as he fought, Zorax knew it was hopeless. The humans were too many, too strong. It was only a matter of time before the last pockets of Zorgan resistance were crushed in a moment of grim clarity. Zorks realized that there was only one way to stop the slaughter. If the Zorans could not defeat the human ship, maybe they could it from within. Leaving the battle raging in the streets, Zorax made his way back to the ruined command center. There he found Soph and his few remaining officers, their faces gone with exhaustion and despair. Supreme Commander, Zorax said, bowing quickly, I have a plan. A way to strike at the heart of the human force. Silo looked up, a faint spark of hope kindling in his eyes. Speak, he commanded. Zorax laid out his proposal. A small team of Zorgan warriors, the best of the best, would infiltrate the human ship and sabotage its key systems from within. It was a suicide mission, but it might be their only chance. To his surprise, Soth agreed immediately. Do it, he said, his voice heavy with wariness. Take whatever resources you need. This may be our last hope. Zorax did no time. He handpicked a team of the most skilled and daring warriors, equipping them with the finest stealth technology and weaponry the Zorans had left, stealing aboard a human landing craft. Zorax and his team made their way up to the orbiting warship. It was a nerve-wracking journey, every moment spent in fear of discovery, but finally, they were inside. The human ship was a maze of corridors and chambers, teeming with activity. Zorax led his team deeper into the vessel, heading for the engine rooms and weapons bay. They're moving with the speed and precision of a lifetime of training. The Zorgan saboteur planted their charges and hacked into key systems. It was delicate, dangerous work. But they did not falter. Just as they were finishing their task, alarms began to blare throughout the ship. They had been detected. Zorax ordered his team to flee to save themselves while they could. But he stayed behind, making sure that the sabotage was complete. As human soldiers closed in on his position, Zorks armed the final charge and closed his eyes, thinking of his home world and his people. For Zorvan, he whispered, and then the world went white. An uneasy truce, the explosion tore through the human warship. Like the fist of an angry god, decks collapsed, bulkheads shattered, and fire raced through the vessel's innards. In a matter of moments, the pride of the human fleet was reduced to a shattered hulk, drifting helpless in the void on the surface of the Zorgan home world. The effect was immediate. The bombardment ceased as the human ground forces, suddenly cut off from their orbital support, fell into disarray. The battered Zorgan defenders surged forward, renewed hope lending strength to their limbs. They fell upon the humans like a wave, driving them back from the ruined cities and shattered fortresses in the command center. Supreme Commander Zoloth watched in stunned disbelief as the tide of battle turned. He had never truly believed that Zorax, his desperate plan, could succeed. As the final human ships flood the system, Zoloth opened a channel to the enemy. Commander, enough, he said, his voice wary but firm. Let us end this madness before more lives are lost. To his surprise, the human agreed. With their most powerful ship crippled, they knew they could not win this fight. A ceasefire was quickly arranged, the terms hammered out over a tense series of negotiations. In the end, the humans agreed to withdraw from Zorgan space in exchange for a promise of no further aggression from either side. It was an uneasy truce, but one that both sides knew they needed. As the smoke of battle cleared, the Zorans began a long, slow process of rebuilding. The scars of the war would linger for generations, but they had survived against all odds. They had endured. Supreme Commander Zoff, his authority shaken by the narrowness of their victory, announced his intention to step down. In his place, he named a new leader, Zorax, the hero who had saved them. All but Zorax was not found among the survivors of the sabotage mission. His body, if anything remained of it, was lost somewhere in the shattered wreckage of the human ship. An uneasy truce, the explosion ripped through the human warship like the fist of an angry god. Tech collapsed, bulkheads shattered, and fire raced through the vessel's innards. In a matter of moments, the pride of the human fleet was reduced to a shattered hulk, drifting helpless in the void on the surface of the Zorgan home world. The effect was immediate. The bombardment ceased as the human ground forces, suddenly cut off from their orbital support, fell into disarray. The battered Zorgan defenders surged forward, renewed hope lending strength to their limbs. They fell upon the humans like a wave, driving them back from the ruined cities and shattered fortresses in the command. Center Supreme Commander Zoff watched in stunned disbelief as the tide of battle turned. He had never truly believed that Zorax's desperate plan could succeed. As the final human ships fled the system, Zoff opened a channel to the enemy. "Commander, enough," he said, his voice wary, "but firm. Let us end this madness before more lives are lost." To his surprise, the human agreed. With their most powerful ship crippled, they knew they could not win this fight. A ceasefire was quickly arranged, the terms hammered out over a series of negotiations. In the end, the humans agreed to withdraw from Zorgan base in exchange for a promise of no further aggression from either side. It was an uneasy truce, but one that both sides knew they needed. As the smoke of battle cleared, the Zorans began the long, slow process of rebuilding. The scars of the war would linger for generations, but they had survived against all odds. They had endured. Supreme Commander Xof, his authority shaken by the narrowness of their victory, announced his intention to step down. In his place, he named a new leader, Zorax, the hero who had saved them all. But Zorax was not found among the survivors of the sabotage mission. His body, if anything remained of it, was lost. Somewhere in the shattered wreckage of the human ship, the Zorans mourned him as a martyr, the savior who had sacrificed everything for his people. In the years to come, his name would become a legend, whispered with reverence by generations of Zorgan children. As for the Zorans themselves, they knew that their days of arrogance and complacency were over. The war with the humans had taught them a bitter lesson that no species, no matter how advanced or powerful, was invincible. They began to reach out to other races, seeking alliances and cooperation where before they had sought only conquest and domination. It was a difficult transition, fraught with missteps and setbacks, but slowly, painfully, the Zorgan learned. They adapted and grew, emerging from the crucible of war as a wiser, more cautious species. They would never forget the sacrifices of heroes like Zorax, but they would honor his memory by building a future of peace and understanding, a future where Zorgan and human could one day stand side by side as friends. It would not be an easy road, but it was one they knew they had to walk for the sake of all the Zorax yet to come.